Books. My name is Jen, and today we are going to talk about the best books that I read in 2024. As you can see, my background is starting to look slightly familiar. I just spent the better part of the day cleaning the office, which desperately needed it, but the bookcase is still a little bit messy. So you'll have to contend with my desk area for now. I did want to talk to you about everything that I read over the course of 2024. We have 10 top books of the year, and we also have a few honorable mentions, and as per usual with these things, when I talk about my best and worst of the year, we'll go into the honorable mentions first. Some of those were rereads, actually, from this past year that didn't quite make the list because they didn't quite hit like top peak reading experiences for me, or it's just they didn't have as much of an impact on my year, but I still hold them above like every other good thing that I read this year, if that makes any sense at all. First of these that I could mention is On Writing by Stephen King. This was one of my textbooks when I was in college. If you haven't been around here before, I went to college. Wow, I don't want to talk about how long it's been. That is a scary thought. It was a while ago. I was in college for creative writing. I graduated with my BA in creative writing. So I have a lot of writing textbooks. I'm actually staring at them right now. They are stacked up on my floor across from me. If you like my videos that I was doing where I talk about sections more in depth on my nonfiction books, I do think I will be doing one about my writing books at some point in the future when I get back to doing those videos. But anyway, this was one of them. This is one of my textbooks from college. This is Stephen King's memoir of the craft, so it is focusing specifically on him and what made him to be a writer, essentially. He goes into a lot of like his childhood and maybe some things that happened to him or his life experience that maybe lended towards his penchant for horror, and as the genre that he prefers to read and work in, and then you get into things that he was really into. He started writing when he was very young, sending things out, getting rejection letters. Like, he really worked at it's very admirable. So it goes over like his childhood, his younger years, and then going off to school, meeting his wife, them starting a family, and struggling as he's still trying to be a writer while working really shitty jobs, until eventually he managed to get published with Carrie, which was his first published novel. So this kind of centers in on that, and also talks a bit about his accident that he had, like his near-death experience. It talks about his drug years. He does not remember writing Cujo from what I remember from reading this. And then there's also a section here where he talks about a writer's toolkit, and where he's trying to pass on advice to other writers about these are things that you should know, just some really solid writing advice, and he shares some like of his editing process. And then a really cool thing at the back of the book is that he has a book list of things that he suggests you to read, whether or not they be fiction or not. Just all around solid read, and I really enjoyed rereading this year. As you can see, I kind of annotated. It's not like a full annotation. Basically, I highlighted things that I found were really profound or funny, or just really solid advice, and then I just tabbed it so I can find it later should I want that advice. But I just really loved rereading this a lot. I did not get a ton of writing done this past year just because life and shit. I did get some writing done that I'm hoping to hear back on in the next couple of months, but yeah, I was able to get something done. It wasn't exactly what I was looking at doing this year, but I will say I think this did help me a little bit. It kind of broke through some stuff in my brain to get me back at the keyboard. So, and something else I reread this year was the Bunnicula series. This is by James Howe. Well, the first book is by Deborah and James Howe, and then James Howe wrote the rest of them himself. This is book 6, Bunnicula Strikes Again. This is a series that I really loved when I was a kid. It was like a horror comedy series. It's middle grade. It's something that I really loved because it has such a delicious sense of humor, which I really enjoyed as a child, but I've also found as an adult I really absolutely adore. I really loved revisiting this, especially as there were a couple of lines, especially in this, specifically in this book, that really hit hard for me, and I think that's something that's really wonderful. I think about revisiting childhood favorites now when you are, you know, an adult, because I feel like you can capture some of that like childhood fun and adventure and hilarity and sweetness, but at the same time, sometimes there's like a specific line or something that just feels so reflective or so true to life, or just it hits different than it does when you are an adult than maybe it did when you were like 7, 8, 10 years old. So yeah, I really just loved revisiting this series this past fall, and I think that's exactly what I needed for then. And another reread that I really loved this past year, also in the fall actually, was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I reread this. As you can see, I did also tab that. Actually looks kind of cool. Like that. Just basically passages that I really loved. Like they were particularly creepy or particularly beautiful. The Haunting of Hill House, I think, is one of those books that I've talked ad nauseum about the adaptations, the show adaptation being one that I cannot actually handle, and the movie adaptations being just kind of silly. But this book in of itself is so much fun, and I know that it couldn't really be categorized as particularly spooky, but I don't think that's the point. I don't think it's supposed to outright absolutely horrify you in any way. For the most part, I think it's supposed to be a very quiet, unsettling, psychological horror. And it just kind of builds and builds over the course of the book, and I absolutely love that. This and Stephen King, that is like peak horror writing for me, and that is exactly what I hope to be able to channel as I continue working on some of my writing. I am not honestly a description girly. Description is actually something that I have a really hard time with my writing, and no matter what I do, I don't think I can quite get to the absolutely ethereal, unsettling, creepy ass, just beautifully written descriptions that are in Hill House. They're very atmospheric. I don't think I can manage that. But I would like to be able to channel that ability of Shirley Jackson's to leave you sitting on the edge of your seat the entire time, just feeling utterly uncomfortable until the last page. Like, I would like to be able to channel that. I really loved revisiting this. I don't know if this will become another like yearly read like I do with like The Shining and A Christmas Carol, but I don't know. We'll see what happens this year. It's so, so good. And then the last honorable mention, I guess, that I will talk about really quick is I found a new mystery series to read. It's the Lady Hardcastle mystery series. They are cozy mysteries set in England in the early 1900s. This is a series by T.E. Kinsey, and yeah, I just needed something to listen to while I was like working on stuff for the holidays for people, and I came across actually what turned out to be book 5, A Picture of Murder, and loved it so much I found what the rest of the series was called, and then also listened to the audiobook of book 1, A Quiet Life in the Country. And this is a series following an eccentric lady and her rather, I don't know what is the word I'm looking for, also kind of eccentric, I guess, maid. So Lady Hardcastle and Florence Armstrong. And they have a very interesting relationship, and yeah, they get pulled into mysteries, and they've had led really eccentric lives so far, and I just love it. I mean, I loved the audiobook anyway, the narration was very well done, but I also just really loved the stories. It is just cozy, but there is like crime involved. I'm really liking the two of them. I also really like the characters that are throughout the town, very quirky people, very interesting like group. It really reminds me of the Miss Marple mysteries. They used to be on like PBS, or you can find them on BritBox now, but just really reminds me of that small town feel of like St. Mary Mead, basically. Everybody's kind of like nosy, and yeah, I really like the vibe of them, and I'm really excited to have found a new series to dive into. I think that's really exciting because a lot of my mysteries that I tend to like, the authors are dead and there's only a finite amount of books that are out there with those characters for me to enjoy up to a point. So it's really exciting to find a series that the author's still around, knock on wood, and so far I think there's like 11, 12 books or something like that, and it seems like he comes out with another one every year or 2 years, so yeah, exciting. Alright, so I spent a little too much time talking about that. Let's actually get into my top 10 reads. So to start off with, at number 10, we have a series that you have heard me talk about a couple of times before, and that is Amulet. This is the series by Kazuki Buishi. This is a graphic novel series by Kazuki Buishi. I think it counts for like middle grade. I mean, it is for Scholastic, so yeah, I guess it's like technically middle grade graphic novel series about brother and sister. Their father died in an accident a couple of years before, and they have recently moved into this kind of creepy old house with their mother. She's kind of inherited it from like old family members that they didn't really know that much about. And right after they move in, a creepy creature attacks and grabs their mom and pulls her through like this portal thing into another world, and brother and sister run after her and find themselves in this really freaky looking place. As an example, there's some of it. I really enjoyed this series a lot. Like, look at how cool that is. This has abso-fucking-lutely gorgeous artwork. Like, just pure absolutely beautiful. Nope, that's a spoiler. I can't show you that. Okay. You just have to take my word for it. There's a lot of artwork. I feel like I've shown you like pieces of this artwork before, but everything is just beautiful. So well done. A very interesting world that has a lot of stuff going on. It gets a little bit cyberpunky at one point. There's like a curse on a bunch of people and they kind of look like animals now, and there's a lot going on. There's like mech stuff, and I'm not usually a fan of that, but I actually don't mind it in this series. The first volume is called The Stonekeeper because it involves a specific sect of people that have these like magical stones and can like utilize them to do crazy shit. It's like there's a lot going on in this series. It is 9 volumes long. The final volume, after like a long hiatus, came out like just fairly recently. I think it was like the beginning of this year. Exactly what I was kind of hoping for. I will say, however, the reason why it is number 10 on this list and not higher up on the list is because while the final volume ended what I was kind of like how I was kind of hoping things would go, I will say that there were sections of things that were slightly more anticlimactic than I would have liked, but still just how much I really love this series, how beautiful I find the artwork and the character growth, and how much I really like a lot of the characters involved, is why it still makes this list as like a top read, but it's just a little bit lower down on the list in general. I still really think this is a series that is worth checking out if you just want something that's really fun and adventurous, and you want something that has honestly 100% beautiful artwork. The cartoony bits of this are really lovely, but the real draw is like the setting in the backgrounds. Very interesting setting. Yeah, it has like a little bit of like, maybe not cyberpunk is what I'm looking at. It's interesting because there's definitely like technology stuff, but a lot of things seemed like it's on the verge of between steampunk and cyberpunk. It's very interesting technology that is involved here and mixed in with like magical stuff going on as well. So very, very intriguing world. Then we get to top book number 9, and that is The Scarlet Pimpernel by Baroness Orsi. So this is the start of another series, believe it or not. I did not know that going into this. This is following the tale of a vigilante. It's actually the first, like, vigilante story, apparently, or like a masked vigilante kind of, like, idea, full of disguises and trying to, like, save people. Like, if you were ever wondering where some superhero stuff was based off of, it's this guy. So, the masked vigilante is called the Scarlet Pimpernel. He has a calling card of leaving a Scarlet Pimpernel behind, and this is set during the French Revolution, and the Scarlet Pimpernel is basically trying to save French nobles, specifically women and children, but he also will attempt to save the men as well, save them from the guillotine, because this is during the terrors, basically. So a lot of people done getting their heads chopped off. It doesn't matter if they were complicit, it doesn't matter if they're like fucking a 5-year-old kid, don't matter. Shit's happening. So yeah, he is our hero of the hour, and he's going around trying to help people, and he has like a whole network of people trying to save these folks from being killed and kind of get them across the channel into England, and either stay there or off to somewhere else where they can be safe. And meanwhile, That is the main part of the story, but we also have a young woman named Marguerite, who is married to this ridiculous buffoon named Percy. Marguerite has not had the best past. She accidentally caused the death of a nobleman. She has a lot of stuff going on, and she is currently being blackmailed to save her dear brother from death. She is currently being blackmailed to spy on people and try to figure out who the Scarlet Pimpernel is and like unmask him for this truly terrible dude. So there's a lot of things going on in this book. You also have Marguerite and her marriage to Percy, and their marriage started out as like a good thing, but things changed and now it's been really like cold and rough and it hasn't been a good time. So you have like two people who love each other, but things are wicked complicated and things are standing in the way. You've got this vigilante trying to help people. You've got spying and stuff like that. There's a lot of things going on in this book, and I really truly enjoyed it. I, like I said, found out that this is the first book in a series. I have looked up the series because I'm like, man, I think I really want to read more of these because I did really enjoy this. The reason it is a little bit lower on the list rather than higher up is I was not a particular fan of some of the tone that the author took with the revolutionaries. She has a lot of contempt for them, which is very clear, which on some level I could 100% understand as someone who is a little bit nervous about hive mind, basically like large groups of people, and somebody comes up with a crazy idea and they just go along with it, like, hey, we're gonna guillotine the noblemen. Alright, well, we're also gonna kill their entire bloodline. Ooh, okay, now we're getting into further than what I would agree with. Just stuff like that. It freaks me out when people in large groups get giant, like, videos that usually ends with mass murder. Call me crazy, it just makes me nervous. So I can totally understand where she was coming from with her contempt for a lot of this, but she was also kind of treating like the noble people like, oh, they didn't do anything. It's basically like kissing their asses, and it's like, no, they did do something wrong. Like King Louis the whatever literally was trying to convince people that he was God ordained. Sir, no, your daddy put you in there. Get out of here, sir. A whole thing. So I didn't really like her tone a lot of the time, trying to put all of the blame on the poor revolutionaries and like take all of the blame off of the noble people, when some of them were honestly quite fucking shitty. Not enough to like make their whole families be killed, that's a lot, but there should have been some kind of recompense for them. Like they're out here killing people, like, man, get to stop. But yeah, so I didn't like her tone with things, and I learned a little bit more about the author, which I think I talked about in my wrap-up when I read this. When was that? January, I think? Yeah, in January. So if you're interested, you can look at my January reading wrap-up, where I went more in depth about this. But I learned some things about the author, and so her essentially writing a love letter to the French nobility makes a lot of sense based on who she is, or was. But looking past those details that I wasn't particularly fond of, I could definitely understand why this has been so popular to have so many sequels, an entire series, to have had, I think, a play or a couple of plays be made of this, a couple different movie adaptations, to be so incredibly popular overall. I can totally understand that because it's very swashbuckling tale. It is very action-packed. If you wanted to read something that has that swashbuckling and adventurous and spying element to it like Three Musketeers, but you don't want to put in the work to read a 700-page book, I mean, this is a very good substitute. And there's also a little bit of like romantic tension in here, which I found particularly delightful. It is not something that I was expecting in this, because this is a children's classic copy that I have here, and there was definitely some underlying sexual tension between Marguerite and Percy at one point that I was like, oh damn, was not expecting, and I loved that, and I think that's what took this up to a top read, besides the fact that I love some masked vigilante bullshit. Like, my favorite superhero is Batman. Like, I love, yeah, I love that kind of stuff. So, I really loved it, despite the things that I wasn't particularly fond of. Also, I have to say, Marguerite being referred to as the cleverest woman in Europe a lot, girl, it ain't true. But she's very smart. She just makes a lot of dumb decisions, but it is something that I am keeping in mind for the future, because I would like to read more of these somewhere down the line. Okay, then we move on to number 8, which was another classic, Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. So this, of course, is the classic tale of a eccentric elderly gentleman who spends a lot of time in his later years reading a whole bunch of chivalrous romances, which kind of convinced him that he is also a knight, and he goes off and has a lot of completely crazy adventures with a man who works on his land, who he convinces to be his squire. Shenanigans ensue. I had been wanting to read this book for a very long time, pretty much ever since I was a little kid and first saw the Wishbone episode, and second, when my aunt introduced me to the Man of La Mancha. So, this tale, wow. It was 100% not what I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting exactly. Maybe something a little bit closer to the musical, which it doesn't really make any sense, because obviously it's the book, it's not a, you know. But this was a lot funnier than what I had previously been expecting. I guess because I've been reading so many adventurous things over the past several years that I just kind of assumed that maybe this would be more along the lines of a Dumas or a Stevenson, you know, something like that, which both have hilarious elements to them and definite, like, humor at places, but not like something so satirical as this, I guess. I really enjoyed this book a lot. I really loved the humor. I am still completely 100% butthurt over the fact that his stupid niece and housemaid decided to burn his library. That happens early in the book, so it's not really a spoiler, because I think he's completely brain-addled. He kind of is, but that's beside the point. Don't burn a library. What's wrong with you? I really loved this. I think the satire is pretty great. I think the social commentary that is in here was particularly enjoyable. Don Quixote is completely delulu. and he is 100% at fault for getting himself and his squire, Sancho, into so many messes. Although I do have to say Sancho kind of contributes here and there. But poor Sancho has to put up with a lot of getting the crap beat out of him because of Don Quixote. I think something about this book, though, that I will say is that this is supposed to be a definite satire. I don't think it's taking itself that seriously for the most of this book, but when I was reading it, especially towards the end and at the end of the novel, I really ended up, I guess, not finding as much about it as humorous, mostly just because I truly was feeling sorry for the character of Don Quixote. I mean, all along throughout the book, yeah, he's definitely causing some harm. Things are not good. He needed, I think, a better babysitter maybe than Sancho for his adventures. And I especially didn't like how people took more advantage later on, especially with the book ending how it does. I just kind of really, yeah, felt very sorry for him, and I guess maybe the satire towards the end just was a little bit wasted on me just because of how sorry I felt for the character, and that I could not really blame him for feeling the way he had to the point of deciding to go out and put on this crappy armor that he had and try to behave like a hero, even if the hero in his old mind is very flawed. I can totally understand trying to make up a life for yourself that is different than what you have, especially when he is as old as he was at the point of this book, where he probably did exactly what he was supposed to his whole life. He did was exactly what was expected of him and more, and he just wanted to go do something noble, highly misguided, but noble for a while, and it didn't exactly work out for him. So ultimately, I don't know, it kind of left me feeling very similar to how I felt in college when I took like a Shakespeare class and we read a bunch of things, and one of the plays, The Merchant of Venice, is presented as a comedy, but looking at it with a modern lens, it's not so much a comedy. Especially when I was reading it, I felt it was more along the lines of a tragedy. And that's kind of how I felt about the last sections of this book, was that there is like a comedy, there is satire here, but there's also something of a, maybe tragedy is pushing it, but yeah, overall I just felt really bad for Don Quixote. That was what I was left with as I read this. So while I will say the writing was very good and this was very engaging and an interesting novel, and I am really glad to have finally checked it off of like my big giant TBR list, and it was fun. This was part of a buddy read that I did with girls over the GKBC. I will say that it's a little bit lower on this list just because I didn't love it as much as I was hoping to love it, just because I ended up feeling like wicked bad for the character, and I don't think that's what you're supposed to be left with at the end of this. I don't know. I looked up some analysis stuff when I was writing up my notes for this, because I was like really thinking about it again. I was like, I was sad. I don't think you're supposed to be sad. Yeah, from what analysis that I'd seen, it seems like no, it's supposed to be straight satire, so I don't know. But yeah, Don Quixote. Worth a read. Now for number 7, we are going to talk about Abroad in Japan by Chris Abroad. So this is the book 10 Years in the Land of the Rising Sun. This is about Chris Broad, who is an English dude. He actually has a YouTube channel. I don't think I ever like linked it or anything when I reviewed this. Did I? No, I don't think I did. I should probably do that, huh? He has a YouTube channel. He moved to Japan, yeah, like 10, 11 years ago. And he did so because he was going to be like an English teacher in like high schools in Japan. And he ended up staying after he was done with his like stint as a English teacher in the high schools. And he had made a YouTube channel originally, I think, to just kind of show family and friends back home what he is up to, also kind of share some of his culture shock. His first few videos are like very funny, just kind of like talking about different things that he was getting used to just being in Japan. Like the one I remember specifically, one part of it was him talking about how he didn't figure out until a little bit later that you have to pay like your electric bill at the local convenience store, which is like clearly not something he was used to doing when he lived in England. I, here in the US, have never heard of that either. So, you know, so that was like some among other things he was getting used to. He was just kind of talking about that, and also trying to learn Japanese when you move to a country where you don't really know the language, besides probably please and thank you. And just kind of talking about relationships with people, relationships with the students, with the teachers at this school, and how he made like his first real friend. And a lot of this book focuses in on that first like year or two when he was busy teaching and trying to acclimate and exploring a little bit. And yeah, that's like a big chunk of this is focusing on like those couple of years, but then it starts going into more about like the YouTube channel and the traveling that he's done, getting to know people, the friends that he's made, the experiences he's had, both good and bad, and really reflecting a lot on his time in Japan and reflecting a lot about the channel and Japan in general, and how it is to move there as a foreigner, and just the culture of it in general. And it's very delightful. Like, I really loved this. I honestly I like reading memoirs. Like, I really love reading memoirs, especially if they are by you know, well-known figures. I really love reading memoirs, and I also really love reading travel memoirs and travel books and things about that. And I would love to visit Japan. Like, that is high up on my bucket list, even though I know 100% it is highly unlikely that I will ever get to Japan. But I love learning more about Japan, and I love his videos. He is a YouTuber that my husband and I regularly watch, and regularly have watched for almost as long as he has been making the videos. And he is one of several people who live in Japan that's videos that we watch, because we just really love Japan and would love to visit it. So I went into this already thinking this is going to be fun, and came out feeling even better about it after reading it. This book, like, you can 100% tell that he wrote this, because I could literally hear his voice in my head as I was reading this. It sounds exactly like him when he is making his videos. It's very funny and reflective and just really well done. Like, I had a great time reading this, and I think that it is honestly, at this point, it might be my favorite travel memoir that I've read so far. I just really, really enjoyed it. I had such a good time reading it. And I also really loved it as someone who is a fan of his channel, learning a little bit more about his experiences when he first moved there, and learning a little bit more about like behind the scenes with like the videos and his friendships with people, especially Natsuki, who is I think a fan favorite and is like his best friend in Japan and has a lot of like, is in a lot of videos. He's absolutely hilarious. So yeah, I really, really loved reading this book a lot. Yeah, I really loved it. I loved his efforts to be a bigger part of the community. I love the relationships. I love the humor, even the self-deprecating bits. I really loved this hilarious but slightly awkward story of like trying to find a place in a country that is not quite like your own, and trying to be a part of a community and giving back, and I really loved the advice that he included about traveling, and his kind of insights on what it is like to visit or be living in Japan. So yeah, really loved this. If you want to read a book about someone who is not from Japan, living, working in Japan, this is 100% it. Then we get into book number 6, which is A Castle in the Clouds by Kirsten Gier. So this is a book that I don't know what to categorize it as. I think when I was doing like my year wrap-up thing, I think I categorized this as a literary fiction contemporary read, because I wasn't really sure what to classify it as. It has a little bit of mystery elements, it has some romance, it has some hilarity, it has like supernaturally stuff happening. You know, there's a lot happening in this book. It is about a girl named Sophie who is like 17 years old, I think, and she has moved away from her family for a while to do an internship at this old hotel in the Swiss Alps called the Castle in the Clouds. And she is, yeah, the intern there. She does a lot of things. She helps make up rooms. She helps a little bit with like the baking, customer stuff. She helps in the spa area, babysits, dog sits. Yeah, she's involved and she's hopping all over the place, and she's part of a crew of very interesting, quirky characters. I really love a lot of the staff that are at this hotel. They're all very unique. There's a cat that is there that shouldn't be there. And this is a very well-known old hotel, although it is kind of hemorrhaging money at this point. The upkeep is a little bit more than the clientele that they're able to bring in, but this is like a famous place. Like, famous people have stayed there. It's very well known. It's been there for a long time. It's been in this particular family for a long time, the current owners of it. Yeah, just very interesting people. There's some rich clientele that are coming in. This is set during right before Christmas, and then leading up into New Year's. So like a big New Year's Eve ball, basically. And this is, yeah, following Sophie as she is working there. She overhears a conversation by one of the brothers who owns the hotel, that he might be wanting to sell it to a land developer, and who would turn it into something like every other frickin' resort, pretty much. So we know that's terrible. And then there's, yeah, the cat that isn't there. There's like mild love triangle elements to it. Like I said, very quirky characters, very interesting people. You've got annoying characters. My god, there is a child in here that I wanted to like just if it was the Overlook, that child would be just right over the fence. Really enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun. This is the last book that I read in 2024. I was not honestly really expecting that much from this story. That sounds terrible to say, but I wasn't really expecting that much. It's just a YA contemporary novel, and there, like I said, there were like this mean girl thing going on because these rich clients. There's like the love triangle thing I said about there's mysterious boy, there's all that kind of stuff, there's like ghosty stuff. So yeah, I wasn't expecting too much from it, and indeed within the first couple of chapters I was kind of like, oh, okay, it's, you know, it's not terrible, but it's not like knocking my socks off either, until like halfway through the novel that I realized that I was fully fucking invested in this book and was having a hard time putting it down and doing anything else. I loved it a lot. It surprised the hell out of me how much I loved it. I put it down after I finished the last page and I was still smiling from ear to ear. This is so charming. Dang, things kind of ramp up in here too. There's some action-y bits that I was 100% not expecting in this novel. Like, this one is also kind of surprising. Like, there's some stuff that happens, yeah, like I said, was not expecting it to happen, and things just kept getting crazier. It was like, what the hell is this? Yeah, I wouldn't, I guess, contemporary, there's some mystery stuff, there's some action stuff, it's got a little sprinkling of everything. It has that like love triangle, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I think it was very nicely done, especially for like a YA book. Like, a lot of the times the YA books really focus in on love triangles, and I think that's why I don't really like them, because I've kind of grown out of that. I consumed so much of that stuff when I was growing up, so that I'm just kind of over it now, this juncture in my life. But I think that that portion of this was just very well done. It wasn't like over the top, it wasn't like a brooding thing. It was very, very well done, well handled, well written. This is translated, so I think that added to a little bit of my shakiness when I first started reading this, because I had to get used to how things were worded. I really liked it. Sophie is a very interesting character. She's also got these like little jackdaws that she should not be feeding, but she feeds them anyway, which I'm like, girl, I get you, I would do that too. And I really loved the descriptions of this hotel too, because it sounded so cool, very interesting. I would love to be able to afford to stay in a place like this, because it sounded just wicked cool, like a more wholesome version of the Overlook. I guess. Yeah, I just really loved this, and it surprised the hell out of me how much I loved this, and it was a very solid way to end the year, because like I said, I just ended this book smiling from ear to ear. It was like also the perfect ending that I could have asked for. And yeah, I mean, you throw in some supernatural stuff at a hotel and you get me happy. So, book number 5. Now we're in the top 5 list. We have Pity the Reader. This is by Suzanne McConnell, with a whole chunky bits of writing advice from the man, the myth, the legend, Kurt Vonnegut. This book, I know when I first was reading this book, when I first reviewed it, when was that? June? Oof. I had a lot to say, I think, in the beginning, because I was a little bit disappointed, because as you can see, it has Kurt Vonnegut up at the top and Susan McConnell in smaller print over here, and for me, I was thinking that this was something that he wrote himself with help from his former student and friend. That's kind of what I was assuming. That's not how things are kind of written on the back either. It just kind of led me to believe that this was a joint project, perhaps between the two of them. I knew he passed away back in, what was that, 2007 or 8, I want to say. So it's been a while, but I just kind of figured, oh, you know, but that is not true, actually. And I do have an ARC copy, so maybe things got corrected later on with the official copy. Yeah, it's just a little bit misleading, so that's my one thing. My one thing says a little bit misleading. So I went into this, the first little bit of this book, slightly butthurt about it, because I was like, damn it, I thought this was a joint project. In reality, it's just Susan McConnell going through his writing and like throwing writing advice at you from like his lectures and stuff like that, because she was his student while he was teaching for a while there. So I was like, ah, shit. But the thing is that I got over that. This is clearly such a labor of love. Like, this entire book was put together with such love and care by Susan McConnell, who 100% like admired and loved this man. Not like in like a romantic, but like as a mentor and a friend. Like, you can tell the amount of work and care that was put into crafting this throughout, because she went through notes. Like, it looks like she went through her own memories and notes from classes that she took from her from consulting with classmates of hers from his classes, from talking with his children and his friends and getting his writing from them, taking a lot from his novels, taking a lot from his own, like his letters to people, his notes, interviews, just a whole bunch of sources is what she pulled all of this like writing advice from. And I also really liked that while, yes, this is writing advice, this is on writing with style. And it is largely about there's also such a lot of like life advice in here too. And I just really, really loved this. And coupling this with On Writing by Stephen King, which I mentioned earlier, I have to say, I think this really helped to invigorate me with writing this year, even though I honestly didn't get that much done this past year with it. I think they really helped push me along. Plus, my guys in my writing workshop really helped all of them in tandem to kind of push me along to actually have something that that I could like submit out there. Yeah, I'm really grateful for that and really grateful for this book to this year, and I just really adored this. And I think putting this up here with the Vonnegut's that I have read so far, like I reread Slaughterhouse-Five the previous year, and then I have another book of his that I read last year that I will be talking about. A spoiler. And I actually have one that I just finished reading this month, because we're in January now. And I'm just, it's really kind of solidifying him for me as a top, tippy-top author for me. I'm really loving his work. I'm really enjoying his work. I'm trying desperately hard not to put this man on like a pedestal, because there's been so many disappointing authors lately. But I just, man, I loved this. And I found such like things to admire about his writing and about him as a person overall, that I just really, really enjoyed this book like a lot. And like I said, it's very clearly a labor of love. This was not only really good advice, very insightful, very reflective, but I also found a lot of it to be truly hilarious. And I just really loved a lot of stuff. I don't want to go like crazy with like quoting things because I know 100% I talked for a while about this in my wrap-up when I talked about that. When was that? June? Yeah, so if you want to hear more about my thoughts about this, you can look at that. Maybe I will leave links or something to my wrap-ups for these if you want more in-depth stuff. Maybe I'll do that. I don't want to say that this surpasses King's on writing as like a writing text, but it's definitely up there with it. I very, very, very much enjoyed reading this and found a lot of like really good advice and a lot to love about his writing in general, and it made me really excited to read more of his writing. Now we can talk about book 4, which, surprise, is God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater by Kurt Vonnegut. I am parched. So this is, what do I even say about this? So this is about Elliot Rosewater, as it says, drunk, volunteer fireman, and president of the fabulously rich Rosewater Foundation. He's about to attempt a noble experiment with human nature with little help from writer Kilgore Trout. I think, is that the best way to explain this book? I guess. This one's a little bit hard to explain, I think. At least as like an opening summary. Yeah, it follows Elliot Rosewater. He comes from a very rich family, a long line of rich folks. They own this town, basically. He has never lived there. His father has never lived there, even though his father is also like a senator for this state. But he ends up just having a lot of shit happen to him. I don't want to get too much into it because I think time is kind of not really in flux in here, but the way things are explained are kind of like all over the place. So I don't want to give something that's a spoiler because it's talked about later. Basically, he has some traumatic shit happen to him, and then he ended up getting married, and he ends up having kind of a breakdown, I guess, and he leaves his wife and his rich life, and he moves to this town that his family was originally from, and he just kind of takes it on as like a project to fix everybody's problems. He was a volunteer firefighter. He is now again a volunteer firefighter, but he is also heading the Rosewater Foundation, which basically, I think it's technically kind of like a tax break thing for his family, essentially, but he is actually there trying to do good work and make a difference and do things, and there's a lot of, it's a satire, so there's a lot of discussion about rich people. For example, his wife also wants to kind of help out, but then she has a mental breakdown because of helping out, because and she is diagnosed as not being able to care that much because it's bad for her health. She can't care about other people or she'll probably die. So just, yeah, pure ridiculous satire. His entire family thinks he is insane for wanting to help people who don't even thank him, really. And there's like stuff within his father's company and businesses. They're trying to get him potentially declared insane and disinherit him because they think that he's gone round the bend for actually trying to do good and care about people. It's a whole thing. It's a giant satire on, yeah, caring about others, giving back. The rich going on being richy, the poor getting poorer. It's a big like discussion on all of that. Actually, if you know me and you know how much I love A Christmas Carol and how much I really enjoyed revisiting Slaughterhouse-5 last year, it should be probably no surprise to you how much I really loved this book. I made a vlog reading this, and I never actually finished editing it and releasing it to you guys because I had a lot going on this previous year, and it was honestly a lot of work trying to edit and piece all of these like vloggy bits of me just talking about this book. That I never did that, but I do still, I think, want to release that vlog at some point, just because I put a lot of work into it, and I also really loved reading this book a lot. There will 100% be spoilers in that vlog because I go more in depth about this book. So definitely read it first if you don't want to be spoiled whenever I eventually come out with that. But I loved this a lot. As you can see, I did like highlight a bunch of things. I made the vlog. I had such a great time reading this. It was so funny and infuriating and insightful and beautifully written, and I just really, really enjoyed it. And at this juncture, this is my favorite Vonnegut. We'll see what happens when I read more of his in the future, but for the moment, this is my tippy-top Vonnegut. It is infuriating at parts. It's very darkly funny through a lot of this, but I also found something very hopeful within here as well. Would I say I think that this one is a little bit less depressing than Slaughterhouse-5, so if you're worried about some of the contents of that being rough to read because it does give descriptions about wartime stuff, there is a little bit of that in here as well, but it much less so than in Slaughterhouse-5. So I would say if you wanted to dive into a Vonnegut, maybe this would be the one to start at, perhaps. At this juncture, I have read this, Slaughterhouse-5, Timequake, and that Pity the Reader, which has like writing advice in it. So I can't 100% tell you exactly what's a good place to start with Vonnegut yet because I haven't read that many of his, but this one is, I think this is slightly more accessible, although all of his books are really easy to read. So yeah, oh man, I really loved it. And I kind of want to do a reread of it, although I have so many other things that I need to be reading. And I also have so many more of his to read, so. Okay, number 3. Might be a surprise, it might not. If you personally know me, this is probably gonna be a surprise. Number 3 is The Hobbit by Tolkien. Man, I've talked some shit about this book and Tolkien's writing in general, haven't I, over the years. Mostly because I DNF'd this multiple times over the years. I received a box set of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings when I was like 10, 11 years old. I remember trying to read it when I received it. Could not do it. Tried it again as a teenager because I watched the movies with my folks. Could not do it. Tried it again a couple of times, I think in college, because I had friends who liked it. Could not do it. Tried it again a handful of years ago when I went home to hang out with my folks, and these were sitting in my old bedroom, and I tried it again. Could not do it. I collected these from my parents' house like a year or two ago, I want to say. and decided that, ah hell, maybe I'll give them another try in the next couple of years. Apparently this was the year for it. How I actually read The Hobbit, which maybe I should tell you what these are about, even though this is so popular and I imagine you know. The Hobbit itself is about a hobbit, Bilbo Baggins. He's very well to do, sitting outside his house one evening, and Gandalf the Grey, who's a big time wizard, comes through and asks him, would you like to join an adventure? Bilbo's like, no, crazy. But Gandalf is pretty much like, no, you're going on an adventure, and yeah, gets him in on an adventure to be a burglar for a series of dwarves, because they are on a journey towards the Misty Mountains to sneak into these mines that are rightfully theirs and steal them back from the evil dragon that took it over like couple hundred years ago. Whatever. This is a journey. It's a lot of walking, a lot of being hungry. So how I ended up reading this was I found the audiobook online. And I was like, you know what? Maybe my problem with this writing, because it is so descriptive and I just always had a hard time with it, I thought maybe it's better if I just listen to the audiobook. Because this is a series that is part of, like, I've talked about this before, I have been, over the past, like, year or so, been trying to either pick up again or pick up for the first time books that I have maybe been a little bit too judgmental about in the past and have either DNF'd them or said I'm never going to read that. So this is one of those, and I figured give it a good chance. I'm going to listen to this audiobook, because what I found was a dramatized audiobook, which has, I think it might just be one dude, but it might be a couple of guys, and they are doing like voices and the whole thing. There's like setting noises, there's music, they actually sing the songs, which was very helpful, because can I tell you what did I skip while physically reading the songs. Sorry. I actually really loved that in here, because they actually like sang them, and I think it might have actually been the music from the Hobbit movie. I have not seen the Hobbit movie yet, but movies rather. But yeah, really loved the audiobook up until there's a chapter or two with big old spiders, and I did not have a good time with that one. Let me tell you, that was not enjoyable. But yeah, I just loved this adventure overall. I think between being helped along by the audiobook and also it finally being like the right time for me to actually tackle this series, I guess. I think sometimes maybe books, like, you're just not ready for them. They have to be read at a certain time. And I think that was the case with this year. So I listened to most of this on the audiobook, and then I ended up actually finishing the last couple of chapters with this physical copy. I can say while reading this and listening to the audiobook, I was on the edge of my seat. I was very into this, and I was having such a good time. Like, such a good time. I really enjoyed the way this is worded. I know that this one, I think, was meant for Tolkien's kids when they were kids, so I think this tone overall reads a little bit younger than Lord of the Rings. So maybe that was also helpful to kind of get me into this storyline overall. But I really enjoyed this. I could totally understand Bilbo and his dislike for the social interactions and being real grumpy about being hungry, because I can tell you I am a right bitch when I'm hungry. So totally get his mindset, could feel for him quite a bit. Also, living in a hobbit hole sounds like a perfection. This was very exciting. I have not watched there's 2 Hobbit movies, right? I have not watched either of them, but I am looking forward to it. And my number 2 read of the year, this might be surprising, but also not surprising for a couple of reasons. Surprising, again, if you know me personally, you've heard me talk shit about this. My husband keeps giving me looks every time I'm talking about this, because he's like, because of how much I enjoyed this, and he's been listening for years to me complain about writing, and also maybe surprising because of how much I talked about this, because this is not number 1 and it's number 2 instead. But yeah, that is just the entirety of Lord of the Rings. I loved these a lot. I am still completely and utterly bewildered by how much I loved reading these. Yeah, these are books that I've complained about. I've complained about the descriptive writing. I've complained about how many times I attempted to, because besides The Hobbit, I also attempted to pick up The Fellowship of the Ring about as many times. Could not do it any of those times. So it, again, utterly probably just bewildering for me to admit how much I really loved this, especially considering how absolutely picky I am about fantasy in general. Again, like I said, I skipped the songs. I'm sorry. Was I skimming slightly in the first book, in the first couple of chapters? Yeah, I might have skimmed a little bit. That changed very quickly because I got further invested into the story and the characters and everything that was going on. It did not matter partway through this. Probably like, I don't know, chapter 5 or 6, I want to say, I was absolutely hooked. I was into this. I was so into it, so invested. As soon as they started, I mean, I liked the bits in the Shire, but I was really super invested by the time you started out on the journey, and we're getting more of like the characters' interactions on their journey and the characters that they were meeting, and like Tom Bombadil should be a household name. I loved the characters. A brave Frodo and Samwise Gamgee, my sweet little cinnamon roll. And of course the 2 lovable chucklefucks, Merry and Pippin. Like, these 4 together, delightful. Loved the scenes with all of them together. Loved all of their, like, friendships. I adore these little hobbits. I also really love when we get introduced to Legolas and Gimli, and I love their friendship as it continues throughout the book. Things are a little contentious with them a bit nope, that's Return of the King. Things are a little bit contentious with them in Fellowship of the Ring. They get to be better friends in Two Towers and Return of the King, and we get to see like just this delightful friendship between the 2 of them crop up that I loved. Was the unlikely friendship between Legolas and Gimli, because elves and dwarves hate each other. Not these 2. These 2 are the best buds. Love that. Loved it so much. I really enjoyed the Fellowship of the Ring. I had such a good time reading this book that, again, shocked the hell out of me, but I had a lot of fun reading this book. I had a lot of fun with all of them together. The Two Towers dragged a little bit more for me. I had a little bit of a harder time just because now the group is split. You're getting like information about a lot of them, and we don't get information about the rest of them until like later on in the book. So that was a bit much, but this also has some great scenes in it. Again, battle scenes. A lot of Merry and Pippin, which I love them. They're idiots. I freaking love them. The Ents. The marching of the Ents. Oh my god. Loved that. Really loved, again, more of that friendship cropping up between Legolas and Gimli. You have the introduction of Faramir. And of course then Return of the King, you have more battles, you have a culmination, you have like just a lot of shit happening in this book too, so much. There's also the appendices in here, which, full disclosure, I did not read all of the appendices. There's a lot, and quite honestly a lot of it that I don't care about as much. A lot of it seems like things that are probably in the Silmarillion, and I'm most likely not going to read that. I did like seeing endings after the ending for some of my favorite characters. I love that. I teared up. I like, oh man. First of all, we have to give credit to Aragorn. My favorite from the movies, in part because Viggo Mortensen's just. But I still really love him. He's like this kind of honorable bad boy thing going on. I think that's more like the movies though. He's got that kind of like thing overall. And in the books he's very much more of the honorable man. I love the little bits. There's not that many scenes with Arwen in the books, but like there is in the movies. But I loved what little there was, and then there's also like a ending after the ending thing in the appendices in here for them, which was great. So I still really love him. One of my favorite parts in the last movie was of course in this book, and I enjoyed that so much. I was like, oh, we're getting to that part, aren't we? Ooh, yeah, we are. And I got so excited, and I enjoyed that immensely. So yeah, really loved that. Really love him. Man, let me tell you though, Faramir is a king among men. There's a line that I think sold him for me. So I was liking him. I liked him from the movies, but I was liking him. He'd just gotten introduced. And then he said, "War must be while we defend our lives against a destroyer who would devour all. But I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only that which they defend." And I was like, oh boy. Hello, book boyfriend. So yeah, I loved these books. I loved them in their entirety, all 4 of these. But yeah, I had such a truly wonderful time reading this series, especially these 3, that believe it or not, I have still been thinking about this all year long and just really thinking about them. And believe it or not, I've already been asking myself, damn, when can I read these again? I have so many books, honestly, to read in 2025 though, and a lot of things that I'm trying to get through. So I don't know if I'm going to reread this series again this year, but I can tell you if I don't get to it this year, it's going to be reread next year. Which leads me to the top read of the year, which might be a surprise, and you might be asking yourself, girl, why is this over Lord of the Rings? Because of how much sheer delight this particular series brought to me back in January of 2024, and how I've held on to that feeling of delight as much as I could throughout the rest of the year, and how much I was looking forward to the new book that came out fairly recently that I haven't got my hands on yet but plan to, and how much I have also been thinking about this all year long. Just all year long. And that was The Adventure Zone, and this is by Clint, Justin Travis, and Griffin McElroy, and the art is by Carrie Peisch. This is a graphic novel series that is following a couple of very interesting characters. This is basically a graphic novel series adaptation of the Adventure Zone podcast by the brothers McElroy and their dad, where they play some version-ish of D&D to much hilarity. This was part of their first campaign that they ran, or rather, Griffin ran the campaign. And these are his brothers and dad's characters brought to life. So this, besides the fourth wall breaks here and there, this is more closely following Taco, the elven wizard, Magnus Burnside's the human berserker, I guess, warrior, and Merle Highchurch, the dwarf cleric. And they're absolutely bonkers shenanigans. This is volume 1. Here there be Gerblins. This is the start of the series where they get a job to basically take some product through a dangerous area to another town, and shit goes wrong. Things get complicated, and this then leads them to even more crazy adventures because they get involved in something even bigger than them and bigger than this situation. So I read the first 5 volumes last year. Volume 6 came out fairly recently, which I'm hoping to get my hands on and read soon. And yeah, I loved this. I think the art is great. A lot of it, I think the backgrounds, the setting, I think the setting's really cool. You have some just absolutely great facial expressions by the characters throughout here. This has like the D&D kind of world, so you have like that vibe to it. And the absolute hilarity that happens. These characters are ridiculous. I went into this series thinking that Magnus was my absolute favorite, and I came out of it being like, no, indeed it is Taco. Who could it be but Taco? I truly loved this. Again, like I said, the art is great. I think it perfectly captures their expressions and all of its hilarity. The story itself, I think, is adapted fairly well for this medium, and it's so hilarious. But besides the hilarity, there's also a very intriguing story. I'm really liking the things that as the series is going along, you're learning more backstory in these 3 characters that goes into more just besides how ridiculous they are. You're seeing like a lot more story behind who they are. Especially by the time you get to like volume 5, which I think was my favorite out of the whole bunch. And each world, each part of this world they're in gets more and more interesting and more fleshing out this universe. So this is like your typical D&D kind of setting. But then volume 2 gets, it's Murder on the Rockport Limited, and it has like a murder mystery train element. So of course I loved that. And then the volume 3 is Pedals to the Metal, which has like a Mad Max kind of like thing going on. Which also in parts reminded me a little bit of pod racing from like the Phantom Menace. And then volume 4 was the Crystal Kingdom, which involves like space and stuff like that. And then the 5th volume, which was my favorite, was the 11th Hour, which had like a western town, but there's like a time loop going on. And I mean, you'd say western and time, and I'm like, oh my god, it's Back to the Future 3. I fucking love it. Yeah. Great. And like I said, I'm loving all the background information we're getting about the characters more. You're learning character growth. And this series, besides just being very well done and being absolutely fucking hilarious, like I laughed out loud a lot throughout reading these books. Loved them. I think the thing that pushed it to be like a tippy top read for me, besides like the hilariousness and really loving the different worlds and involving like these tropes that I really love and find like wonderful, what really pushed it for me was the heart behind it. I shockingly teared up a couple of times while reading these books. What business did the McElroys have making me feel things besides hilarity while I'm reading the graphic novels? Like, I was not expecting that at all. But damn, especially with the last volume that I'd read, oh man, I was not, it was very unexpected. But I loved it, and I loved these in general. And like I said, I have not really stopped thinking about these over the course of the year either. Like they've also been in the back of my head a lot of the times, and just eagerly anticipating that 6th volume. It's crazy, the juxtaposition with this book between the absolute hilarity and just chock full of dick jokes, and then on the next page you turn it and all of a sudden there's something like heart-wrenching happening, and I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah, I love this, and I loved little Easter eggs in here to like inside jokes if you're like a fan of like the podcast or of the McElroys in general. So yeah, wonderful, wonderful, loved it. So yeah guys, this was my best reads of 2024. Overall, as you can see, I had a pretty great year for reading. Let me know if any of these are books that were also your top reads of the year, if you love them, or if there's something that you can't wait to read. Highly recommend all of them. And thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you are new here and would like to subscribe, please indeed do so. And I will see y'all in the next video.